The champagne was a 2012 Dom Perignon. Lauren had picked it up on her way home. She always did have expensive taste when she was celebrating someone else's success. The bubbles rose in lazy spirals through the crystal flute, catching the light from the pendant lamp above our dining table. "To my husband," Lauren said, lifting her glass. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and the emerald dress she wore matched her eyes perfectly. She'd clearly put effort into tonight. The good china was out, candles flickered on the sideboard, and something that smelled like filet mignon was warming in the oven. "Chief Operating Officer of Vertex Technologies. I always knew you'd get it, baby." Her smile was radiant. 12 years of marriage, and she still had a smile that could light up a boardroom or a bedroom with equal effect. The tiny lines around her eyes that she hated, that she'd been talking about getting treated, only made her look more real to me. More human. Or they used to. I set down my glass without drinking. "I know about Chicago," I said. "I've known since March. I used it to destroy his career. Now I'm going to destroy yours." Lauren's smile didn't fade immediately. That's the thing about masks. They take time to slip. 3 full seconds passed while her brain processed what I'd said, cross-referenced it against her carefully constructed lies, and finally arrived at the realization that the ground beneath her feet had turned to quicksand. "What are you talking about?" "Room 1847. Room service for 2 at midnight. 8 months of deleted texts. The promotion Tyler promised you when he took my job." I stood, smoothing my tie out of habit. "The divorce papers are already filed. Effective tomorrow, you're on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into conflicts of interest. I made sure of that before I accepted the position." The color drained from her face. Not all at once. It was gradual, like watching the tide go out. First her cheeks, then her lips, then that carefully maintained composure she'd spent years perfecting. "Ryan, whatever you think you know." "I don't think, Lauren. I know. There's a difference." I pushed back from the table. "You should have learned that about me by now." I walked past her, grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door, and paused with my hand on the knob. "Your things will be boxed by Friday. I suggest you call a lawyer tonight. You're going to need one." Behind me, I heard the champagne glass shatter against the floor. I didn't turn around. 3 months earlier, I was a different man. Or maybe I was exactly the same man, and I just didn't know it yet. March 4th was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my early days. I arrived at Vertex headquarters at 6:15 a.m., a full hour before anyone else on the executive floor. The city sprawled beneath my corner office on the 37th floor, still wrapped in pre-dawn darkness, the lights of the skyline blinking like dying stars against the gray. I liked the silence. Always had. 8 years in military intelligence had taught me to appreciate the spaces between noise, the moments when you could actually think. Vertex's headquarters held 8,000 employees during business hours, a constant hum of ambition and anxiety and corporate maneuvering. But at 6:15 a.m., it was mine alone. My computer chimed. New email. I glanced at the sender field. Blank. Subject line. Ask your wife about Chicago. Room 1847. Tyler Grant was in 1849. I read it 3 times. Most men would have felt their stomach drop. Most men would have reached for their phone immediately, demanding answers, spiraling into panic or rage. I've never been most men. In military intelligence, we had a saying. The first casualty of surprise is judgment. When something unexpected happens, your amygdala floods your brain with cortisol and adrenaline, hijacking your prefrontal cortex. You stop thinking strategically. You react. I didn't react. I took a screenshot, noted the timestamp, 6:23 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and saved it to an encrypted folder I'd created years ago for exactly this kind of contingency. Then I made myself a cup of coffee from the machine in my office, sat back in my chair and began to think. Who sent this? The lack of sender information suggested someone sophisticated enough to use anonymous channels. Someone inside the company, most likely. They'd referenced specific room numbers, which weren't public information. Someone who wanted me to know, but didn't want to be connected to the revelation. Why now? The C-suite selection was heating up. Victor Ashworth's retirement announcement had triggered a feeding frenzy among the senior executives, myself included. If someone wanted to destabilize the competition, strategic timing would be essential. And what did they want? That was the question I couldn't answer yet. Information without motive is just noise. I needed to understand the angle. But first, I needed to verify the claim itself. The 8 a.m. executive meeting started precisely on time because Victor Ashworth believed punctuality was the first indicator of competence. The conference room filled with the usual suspects. Diana Brooks from Product Innovation, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in her signature severe bun. Kevin Price from Legal, looking like he'd already consumed 3 cups of coffee and was contemplating a 4th. Patricia Dunn from HR, her tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. And Tyler Grant. Tyler walked in like he owned the room. He always did. 47 years old, still handsome in that weathered way that men with 3 divorces and a regular gym routine tend to be. His hair had gone salt and pepper in the past year, but he wore it like a badge of distinction rather than a sign of aging. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Ryan. He clasped my shoulder with the easy familiarity of a man who'd never doubted his own worth. Ready for another week in the trenches? Always, I said, returning his smile with one of my own. How was your weekend? Fantastic. Took the boat out on the lake. You and Lauren should join us sometime. Brittany would love the company. Brittany was wife number 4, a former pharmaceutical sales rep who'd caught Tyler's eye at a conference 2 years ago. The fact that he was still married to her was something of a company record. We should do that, I said. Lauren loves the water. Lauren arrived 2 minutes late, sliding into her seat with an apologetic wave to Victor. She was VP of Marketing Communications, which meant she spent her days crafting narratives for other people, spinning failures into learning opportunities, scandals into pivots, disasters into chances for growth. The irony of her position wasn't lost on me. Our eyes met across the table. She gave me a small smile, the intimate kind reserved for spouses who share a bed and a mortgage and 12 years of accumulated history. I smiled back. The meeting proceeded as usual. Quarterly projections showing 7% growth against 9% targets. Market analysis suggesting increased competition from Meridian Systems in the enterprise AI space. Discussion of the upcoming C-suite selection now that Victor was retiring. Any thoughts on timeline? Diana asked, her pen tapping against her notepad. Victor leaned back in his chair. The board meets again in 6 weeks. I'll be making my final recommendation by end of month. Tyler laughed. That easy, confident laugh that had closed 1,000 deals. Better get my nameplate ready for the corner office. Patricia Dunn smiled thinly. Diana rolled her eyes. Kevin coughed into his coffee. I watched. I listened. I noted Tyler's hand brush against Lauren's when she passed him a document. The way she leaned slightly toward him when he spoke. The way they didn't look at each other directly, because looking would reveal too much. Beneath the surface, the pieces were already starting to fall into place. That evening, I returned home at my usual time. 7:15 p.m. Lauren's car was already in the driveway. Unusual, since she typically worked late on Tuesdays. Hey, babe. She was in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled like the Thai curry she'd learned from a cooking class 3 years ago. She tilted her head up for a kiss, which I provided. Her lips were soft, familiar. I wondered how many times they'd touched Tyler Grant's. Long day? The usual. Victor's writing everyone hard about the transition. I opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer. You're home early. Figured I'd surprise you. I know Tuesdays are long for you. I appreciate that. We ate dinner at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 1,000 meals over the past decade. Lauren talked about a new campaign she was developing for the Lighthouse launch, our AI platform that was supposed to revolutionize the industry. I asked questions. I nodded at appropriate intervals. I watched her phone sitting face down on the table, angled away from me. Think you have a real shot at COO? She asked, refilling her wine glass. Depends on a lot of factors. Tyler's the favorite. The board loves his numbers. Her hand paused for just a moment. Just a fraction of a second. Anyone else would have missed it. Tyler's got experience, she said carefully. But you're smarter. Everyone knows that. We'll see. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I wasn't angry. Anger would come later, in small doses, carefully controlled. What I felt instead was something colder. Clarity. I had a hypothesis. Now I needed evidence. March 5th. I used my VP credentials to access Vertex's administrative systems, travel records, expense reports, room assignments for company events. The November conference in Chicago had sent 49 executives from our firm. I cross-referenced room assignments first. Lauren Mitchell, room 1847. Tyler Grant, room 1849. Adjacent rooms. My mind flashed to hotel layouts I'd studied in intelligence training. The standard Hyatt configuration placed odd-numbered rooms on one side of the hallway. Rooms ending in 47 and 49 would share a wall. More importantly, they'd potentially share a connecting door. I pulled room service records next. November 14th, 11:47 p.m. Dinner for two, delivered to room 1847. Steak medium rare, salmon, 2 bottles of Opus 1, chocolate souffle. Tyler's room showed no orders that night. My heart rate stayed at 62 beats per minute. I'd checked. This wasn't confirmation, circumstantial evidence, nothing more. But it was a data point. And data points build patterns. Then I noticed something else in the records. Diana Brooks. Room 1852. Same floor. 4 doors down. I filed that information away. By end of day, I had expanded my search to cover 2 years of conference attendance. The pattern that emerged would have been obvious to anyone who bothered to look. Tyler and Lauren had attended 11 conferences together in 18 months. They'd been assigned to the same floor 8 times. On 6 of those occasions, their rooms were adjacent or within 2 doors of each other. Room service charges appeared and disappeared with suspicious regularity. Dinners for 2 charged to 1 room, breakfasts appearing on expense reports attributed to client meetings. I printed everything, organized it chronologically, created a timeline that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. But I wasn't ready to move yet. I needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal before I acted. That night, I went home and had dinner with Lauren as if nothing had changed. She talked about her day. I listened. I laughed at her jokes. I complimented the pasta she'd made. And underneath my smile, I was cataloging every gesture, every word, looking for the cracks in her performance. They were everywhere, once you knew where to look. The way she avoided eye contact when she mentioned Tyler's name. The slight tension in her shoulders when I asked about her schedule for the following week. The fact that she checked her phone 3 times during dinner. Quick, furtive glances that she thought I didn't notice. This wasn't a one-time indiscretion. This was a sustained affair. My wife had been sleeping with Tyler Grant for at least a year and a half, possibly longer. I did the dishes while she watched television in the living room. Standing at the sink, my hands in warm water, I thought about all the ways this could play out. Confrontation, divorce, public scandal, private settlement. Each path had advantages, each had costs. In military intelligence, we called this phase the targeting cycle, the process of identifying objectives, analyzing options, and selecting the optimal course of action. Emotion had no place in it. Impulse was the enemy of effectiveness. I finished the dishes, kissed my wife goodnight, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I would continue gathering intelligence. Tonight, I would sleep. The war had begun. But the first battle wouldn't be fought for weeks yet. I closed my laptop, walked to my office window, and looked out at the city 40 floors below. Rush hour traffic crawled through the streets, red taillights stretching toward the horizon like a river of fire. I felt something stir in my chest. Not rage, not grief, but something more useful. Purpose. Wasn't that the one where the keynote speaker collapsed? Crazy weekend. March 6th. Breakfast. I said it casually, spreading butter on my toast without looking up. Lauren paused with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Which one? Chicago, the November conference. What was his name? Brennan? The hedge fund guy? Oh, she set down her cup. Right. The heart attack during the panel, they had to bring in paramedics. You were there for that. I barely remember it, honestly. Boring panels, bad food. I mostly stayed in my room working on Q4 projections. She picked up her phone, scrolled absently. The hotel spa was nice, though. Got a massage. Must have been productive, at least. Yeah. She smiled. That warm, familiar smile I'd loved for 12 years. Very productive. The micro-expressions that crossed her face were subtle but unmistakable. The slight tightening around her eyes, the almost imperceptible swallow, the way her gaze flicked down and to the left for a fraction of a second. Textbook deception indicators. We should go back sometime, I said. Just the two of us. Take a long weekend. That sounds nice. She didn't meet my eyes. Maybe after the selection settles down. I requested a meeting with Diana Brooks on March 10th, under the pretense of discussing cross-departmental synergies, corporate speak that could mean anything and therefore raise no red flags. Conference room, 27th floor. Blinds closed. I arrived 5 minutes early and arranged the chairs so we'd be facing each other across the narrow table. No barriers between us. Diana entered at exactly 2 p.m., carrying a leather portfolio and wearing her characteristic expression of controlled skepticism. She'd been at Vertex for 12 years, surviving and thriving in an industry that routinely chewed up women and spat them out. I'd always respected her. Cold, brilliant, perpetually underestimated by the boys' club that ran our C-suite. Ryan, she took her seat. Synergies? I'll get to the point. Did you send me the email? Her expression flickered. Surprise quickly masked. What email? Diana. I leaned forward. I don't have time for games. Room 1852. Same floor in Chicago. You saw something. You know something. Did you send it? A long moment passed. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere in the distance, an elevator dinged. Then she smiled. Thin, sharp, like a blade catching light. Yes. Why? She uncrossed her legs, leaned back in her chair, regarded me with eyes that had seen too much corporate warfare to be easily impressed. Because Tyler Grant is a predator who's been protected by his quarterly numbers for 15 years. Because 3 years ago, he did the same thing to me. Made promises, used me, then threw me away when someone more useful came along. And because I'm exhausted watching him fail upward while the rest of us follow the rules. I let the silence stretch, giving her space to continue. You and Tyler, I said finally. 2019 to 2021. 2 years. Diana's voice was flat, controlled. He told me he was leaving his third wife. He told me he'd recommend me for the CEO position when Victor retired. He told me we'd run this company together. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. Instead, he went to the board and told them I was emotionally unstable. Said I couldn't handle pressure. Nearly torpedoed my entire career. Why didn't you report him? To whom? HR? Diana's eyebrows rose. Patricia Dunn has 3 kids in private school and a mortgage she can barely afford. She's not going to take on the board's golden boy over. She said allegations from a woman scorned. She paused. So I waited. I watched. I collected. And my wife. I saw them in Chicago, 2 in the morning. He was leaving her room, straightening his tie like he'd just closed a deal. They didn't see me. I was coming back from the vending machine, couldn't sleep. Diana shrugged. I figured you deserved to know. Why me? Why now? Because I don't want Tyler embarrassed or reprimanded or sent to some executive sensitivity seminar. I want him destroyed. Professionally, financially, personally. Everything he's built on lies and manipulation and other people's broken hearts. Her eyes met mine. You're the only one with both the motive and the means to do it properly. She reached into her portfolio and produced a small flash drive, sliding it across the table. What's this? Insurance. Diana's voice dropped. Tyler's not just sleeping with your wife, Ryan. He's been sharing confidential strategic information with Meridian Systems, our biggest competitor. I felt my jaw tighten. That's a serious accusation. It's more than an accusation. There are encrypted messages on that drive, references to Project Lighthouse, dollar amounts, offshore accounts, 2.3 million total, by my estimate. She leaned forward. I couldn't prove it on my own. The technical access required is above my clearance. But you're VP of Strategic Operations. You have system privileges I don't. I picked up the drive, turning it over in my fingers. Small enough to hide in a pocket. Potentially explosive enough to end careers, marriages, and freedom. If this is fabricated, it's not. I've spent 2 years gathering this. Everything on there I obtained legally. She paused. Mostly legally. Nothing that would be inadmissible if this ever went to court. Why give this to me? Because we want the same thing. Diana stood, smoothing her skirt. Tyler Grant destroyed, completely and irreversibly. I don't need the COO position. I never wanted it. I just want to watch him lose everything he's ever cared about. She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Do what you want with it, Ryan. But if I were you, I'd verify everything independently. Create a paper trail that doesn't trace back to me. We never had this conversation. Diana's smile returned, cold, satisfied. Of course not. Kevin Price's office smelled like old coffee and leather-bound law books. As VP of Legal, he occupied one of the smaller corner offices on the 34th floor, surrounded by filing cabinets stuffed with contracts and depositions and the accumulated paperwork of a decade's worth of corporate battles. He was the closest thing I had to a friend at Vertex. We'd started the same year, worked our way up through adjacent departments, shared enough lunches and late nights to develop something like trust. More importantly, he possessed an ethical flexibility that made him invaluable in situations exactly like this one. I handed him the flash drive the day after my meeting with Diana. I need you to look at something, quietly, no digital trail. Kevin's eyebrows rose toward his receding hairline. Should I be concerned? Probably. He plugged the drive into an air-gapped laptop he kept for sensitive matters, one that had never been connected to the company network. I watched his face as he scrolled through the contents. The color gradually drained from his cheeks. Ryan, His voice was careful, measured. Where did you get this? Does it matter? It matters a lot if we're going to use it. He looked up at me, his eyes serious behind his wire-framed glasses. This is encrypted correspondence between Tyler Grant and someone at Meridian Systems. References to Project Lighthouse, our unreleased AI platform. Dollar amounts. Offshore accounts in the Caymans. He sat back in his chair. If this is real, then Tyler's been selling company secrets. This isn't HR territory. Kevin rubbed his temples. This is federal, corporate espionage, wire fraud, potential CFAA violations. If we're right and this evidence was legally obtained, he's looking at serious prison time. And if we're wrong, then whoever gathered this information could face charges themselves, and anyone who helped them build a case. His eyes met mine. Ryan, what's really going on here? You didn't pull me into this room to discuss hypotheticals. I'd known this moment was coming. Kevin was too smart to accept half-truths, and I needed him too much to offer them. I told him everything. The anonymous email. Lauren. The hotel rooms. The pattern I'd uncovered over 3 days of careful investigation. Kevin listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, then let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. So Tyler's sleeping with your wife and selling your company's secrets? Possibly using the affair as cover for his espionage meetings. That's my working theory. And you want to what? Expose him? Confront her? I want to end him, professionally, financially, and legally. But I need to do it in a way that doesn't blow back on us, or on the person who gave me that drive. Diana Brooks. I didn't confirm or deny. I didn't need to. Kevin nodded slowly, his legal mind already mapping the terrain. So we verify independently, build our own paper trail. If we can establish the Meridian connection through legitimate channels, it doesn't matter where the initial tip came from. Exactly. What about Lauren? I stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city. What about her? She's your wife, Ryan. 12 years. Don't you want to? He trailed off. I don't know. Give her a chance to explain? Try to work things out? I turned back to face him. Would you? Kevin didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next 2 weeks were surveillance. Not physical. I wasn't going to follow my wife around the city like some desperate cliché from a daytime drama. Digital, financial, behavioral. The kind of surveillance that leaves no fingerprints but reveals everything. Lauren's credit card statements showed a purchase at Whitmore & Sons Jewelers. Men's watch, $4,200. A gift, presumably. Not for me. My birthday wasn't for 3 months, and she'd asked 2 weeks ago what I wanted. I'd said a new briefcase. She'd laughed and said she'd think of something better. Her phone habits had changed. The device was always face down now, angled away from me when she typed. She'd started keeping it in her purse at night instead of on the nightstand where it had lived for the past decade. She'd been staying late at work 3 nights a week. But when I checked the building's security logs, something I'd never done before in 12 years of marriage, her badge showed no after-hours access. She wasn't at Vertex. She was somewhere else. With someone else. Meanwhile, Kevin and I worked to verify Diana's claims through legitimate channels. He pulled Tyler's expense reports through legal's standard audit process. I cross-referenced strategic documents that had been presented to executive leadership with subsequent Meridian product announcements. The results were damning. 2 of my proposals from the past year, a machine learning architecture for predictive analytics and a cloud infrastructure optimization protocol, had appeared almost word for word in Meridian's public documentation 6 months after I'd presented them internally. Tyler had been in every meeting where I'd discussed these ideas. Tyler had access to every document I'd created. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was stealing my intellectual work and selling it to our competitors. Megan Stafford appeared at my office door on April 8th. 26 years old, 2 years out of her MBA, Lauren's executive assistant for the past 18 months. I'd interacted with her perhaps a dozen times. Pleasant enough, efficient, forgettable in the way that assistants are supposed to be. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Mr. Mitchell, do you have a minute?" "Of course, Megan. Come in." She perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, her hands twisting in her lap. "I don't know if I should be telling you this. I've been going back and forth for weeks, and I finally decided, I think you need to know. Take your time. Mrs. Mitchell is in trouble." The words came out in a rush. "I've been covering for her. For months. Fake calendar entries, diverted phone calls. She's been meeting someone, I don't know who, at an apartment downtown. She told me it was for focus groups, off-site brainstorming sessions, but 3 weeks ago she asked me to help her move money between accounts. $50,000. From your joint savings to a personal account I didn't know she had." Megan's eyes were bright with tears. I refused. I told her I couldn't be part of that. And she threatened my job. Said if I told anyone, she'd make sure I never worked in this industry again. I let the silence stretch, giving her space to compose herself. "Megan, I appreciate you telling me this. I know it wasn't easy. I didn't know what else to do. I've been losing sleep. I keep thinking about my mom, how she always said to do the right thing even when it's hard. You did the right thing." I slid a notepad across the desk. "Can you write down everything you remember? Dates, times, the address of the apartment, anything specific she said about the money or where it was going?" Megan nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "And Megan, this conversation stays between us. For now. But I want you to know, whatever happens, I'm going to make sure you're protected. You have my word." The apartment question demanded answers. I couldn't investigate it personally. Too risky. Too likely to tip my hand. Instead, I hired a private investigator through Kevin's network of contacts. Former FBI, impeccable discretion, experience with corporate matters. His instructions were specific. Identify who owned the property at 847 Lexington Street, apartment 12B. Nothing more. No surveillance, no photographs, no direct contact with the subjects. The report arrived 3 days later. The apartment was leased to a shell company called Parkview Holdings, LLC. Parkview's registered agent was a law firm in Delaware that specialized in asset protection. That firm, in turn, was connected to a web of corporate entities that took 3 more days to untangle. The ultimate parent company, buried under 4 layers of LLCs and holding corporations, was a subsidiary of Meridian Systems. I sat in my home office, staring at the paperwork spread across my desk. The pieces clicked into place with the precision of a Swiss watch. Tyler wasn't just meeting Lauren for their affair. He was doing it at an apartment owned by the very competitor he'd been selling our secrets to. The $50,000 Lauren tried to move? Almost certainly her cut of the espionage profits. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was potentially complicit in corporate espionage. I poured myself a whiskey and thought about what that meant. If this came out through official channels, Lauren wouldn't just face divorce proceedings. She'd face federal charges, prison time, the complete destruction of everything she'd built. Did I want that? I finished my drink, poured another. She made her choices. Now she'd live with the consequences. Victor Ashworth summoned me to his office on April 12th. Late evening, after most of the building had gone dark. The cleaning crews hadn't even started their rounds yet. His corner suite was legendary at Vertex, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, mahogany furniture that probably predated my birth, and a collection of single malt scotches that would make a collector weep with envy. He poured 2 fingers of Macallan 25 without asking. "Close the door, Ryan." I did. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I'm going to tell you something that stays between us. Understood?" "Of course, Victor." He leaned back, the leather creaking beneath him. In the soft light of his desk lamp, he looked every one of his 61 years, tired, weathered, but still sharp. Still the deal-maker who'd built Vertex from a 3-person garage operation into a $4 billion enterprise. I've known about Tyler's activities for 6 months. I kept my face neutral. Years of intelligence training, finally paying dividends. "Sir? The Meridian connection, the leaked strategic documents, the whole sordid mess." He sipped his bourbon. "I've been building a case quietly, wanted to see how it would play out." "Why?" "Because the C-suite selection wasn't just about finding my replacement, Ryan. It was about identifying who could be trusted." His eyes met mine. I needed to know who would self-destruct when given enough rope, who would maintain their integrity under pressure, who would put the company's interests above their own ambitions. "You were testing us." "I was observing. There's a difference." He set down his glass. "Tyler's been selling secrets. Diana's been playing her own games. Did you think I didn't notice her suddenly cozying up to you? And Lauren..." My jaw tightened. "You know about Lauren. I know that your wife has been making very poor choices. I know that you've been aware of those choices for several weeks now. And I know that you've handled the situation with more discipline than I would have expected from anyone in your position. What did you expect me to do?" Most men would have confronted her immediately, made a scene, let their emotions compromise their judgment. Victor's gaze was steady, appraising. "You didn't. You investigated. You built a case. You waited for the right moment to act." He raised his glass in a small toast. "That's exactly the kind of thinking this company needs in a COO. The position was always going to be mine. The position was always going to go to whoever demonstrated they could handle crisis without breaking. You've demonstrated that." He finished his bourbon. "Now it's time to let everything play out. Trust the process. And trust that the people who made bad decisions will face the consequences of those decisions." I stood to leave, but Victor's voice stopped me at the door. "Ryan. One more thing." I turned. "When this is over, when the dust settles, you're going to have to decide what kind of leader you want to be. The kind who uses power for revenge, or the kind who uses it to build something better." His eyes were unreadable in the dim light. "Choose wisely." The dominoes started falling on April 15th. Patricia Dunn formally interviewed Tyler about his relationship with Lauren. He denied everything, of course, swore on his children's lives, all 5 of them, from 3 different marriages, that there had never been anything inappropriate between them. HR had receipts, travel records showing them on the same floor at 8 conferences, room service charges that didn't match their stated movements, witness statements from colleagues who'd noticed them leaving the same elevator, entering the same taxi, sitting too close at company dinners. The interview lasted 2 hours. I wasn't present, but Kevin had a contact in HR who gave us the highlights afterward. "He started confident," Kevin reported, stopping by my office that evening. "All charm and indignation. How dare they question his integrity? He's given 15 years to this company." Then Patricia showed him the documentation, and you could actually see the moment he realized how deep a hole he'd dug. What did he say? First, he tried to explain away the travel records, business requirements, coincidence. When that didn't work, he pivoted to claiming it was a friendship that got complicated, professional boundaries that blurred. He insisted there was no quid pro quo, no conflict of interest. And Patricia. Kevin smiled grimly. She asked him about the Lexington Street apartment. His face went white, He asked for a lawyer. The investigation was accelerating, but I wasn't satisfied with half measures. I needed Tyler's destruction to be complete, professional, legal, and personal. April 16th. Through Kevin, I submitted an anonymous packet of documentation about the Meridian connection to Vertex's internal security team. Not Diana's evidence, my own independently gathered paper trail. Time-stamped strategic documents. Comparison analyses showing the migration of proprietary concepts to competitor products. Financial irregularities in Tyler's expense, reports that pointed toward unreported income. The security team took less than 24 hours to escalate the matter. April 17th. Tyler was summoned to an emergency meeting with legal, HR, and 3 board members, including James Holloway, the chairman. I heard later that Tyler walked in expecting to negotiate his way out of the relationship allegations. He walked out 2 hours later with the FBI's contact information and instructions to retain criminal defense counsel. Security escorted him from the building. His access badges were deactivated before he reached the parking garage. His computer was seized. His office was sealed. I watched from my window as he got into his Mercedes, sat behind the wheel for a long moment, and then drove away. He didn't look up at the building. He didn't look at anything. That night, I allowed myself 1 glass of scotch in celebration. Just one. The job wasn't finished yet. April 18th. The FBI contacted Vertex regarding a corporate intelligence matter. Federal agents executed a search warrant at Tyler's home in the suburbs. They found encrypted devices, offshore account documentation, and enough evidence to build a case that would take years to fully prosecute. April 19th. Diana Brooks withdrew her candidacy for the COO position. She stopped by my office afterward, looking more at peace than I'd ever seen her. "Got a minute?" she asked from the doorway. "For you?" "Always." She closed the door behind her and settled into the visitor's chair with the easy grace of someone who'd finally set down a burden they'd been carrying for years. "I wanted you to hear it from me before the announcement. I'm withdrawing from consideration." "You don't have to do that. Tyler's gone. The field is open." "I know." She smiled. Not the thin, calculated smile I was used to, but something warmer. "But I never wanted the position. What I wanted was to watch Tyler lose everything." She leaned back. "Mission accomplished." "So what now?" "CEO position at a smaller company. Healthcare technology. They've been recruiting me for months." She paused, her expression shifting to something more serious. "There's something else you should know. Something I debated telling you." "I'm listening." "Before I sent you that email, Lauren came to me first." I went still. "What?" "Back in January, she wanted me to ally with Tyler against you. To undermine your proposals, plant doubts with board members, feed Tyler information about your strategies." Diana's eyes met mine. "She told me things about your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses. She was willing to destroy you to get Tyler into that position." The words landed like stones in still water. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I needed you focused on Tyler. If I'd told you everything, you might have confronted her too early, given them time to cover their tracks." She stood, smoothing her blazer. "I sent you that email because you deserve to know what kind of war you were actually in. Consider it professional courtesy between survivors." Survivors. That's what we are. People who got caught in Tyler Grant's orbit and managed to escape before he burned us completely. She extended her hand. "Good luck with everything. You're going to be excellent." I shook her hand. "Thank you, Diana, for everything." April 20th. The board announced Ryan Mitchell as the new Chief Operating Officer of Vertex Technologies, effective May 1st. I came home that evening to champagne, candlelight, and my wife's perfect smile. You already know how that conversation ended. The confrontation that night lasted 3 hours. It's strange how time dilates in moments of crisis. Each minute stretched like taffy, every word landing with the weight of stones. Lauren's first instinct was denial. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ryan. This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshots I'd prepared. Room 1847, November conference. Room service for 2 at 11:47 p.m. Tyler's room was 1849. No orders that night. I swiped to the next image. March, April, June of last year, same pattern, adjacent rooms, mysterious charges. That doesn't prove anything. We were at the same conferences. That's our job. Then explain this. I showed her the credit card statement. Whitmore and Sons, $4,200. Men's watch. Who was that for? Her face went pale. It was for my brother. His birthday. Your brother's birthday is in October. This charge was from February. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. Ryan. Don't. My voice was quiet, but something in it made her flinch. Don't lie to me again. Not now. Not when I know everything. The denial gave way to minimization. Okay, fine. She pressed her hands against her temples. It happened once, one time, at the Chicago conference. I was drunk, lonely. You'd been traveling so much and it was a mistake. A terrible mistake that I've regretted every day since. It wasn't one time, Lauren. It's been 18 months. 8 conferences. The apartment on Lexington Street. The one you've been visiting every Wednesday when you told me you were working late. I know everything. The fake calendar entries Megan's been making for you. The $50,000 you tried to move last month. The promotion Tyler promised you when he took my job. I stood, walked to the window, looked out at the darkness beyond. What I can't figure out is why. Were you that unhappy? Was I that blind? The attack phase came next. Predictable, desperate. You want to know why? Lauren's voice rose, cracking with emotion. Because you were never here, Ryan. 12 years of marriage and you've spent half of it in meetings, on planes, buried in your laptop until midnight. When was the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, like I was something more than a fixture in your house? I was building a career, for us, for our future. Our future? She laughed bitterly. What future? The one where you make COO and work even longer hours. The one where I'm just the executive's wife who shows up at charity galas and pretends everything's perfect? That was the future you wanted. You said it yourself. Career first. No children because they'd hold you back. We made those decisions together. I made those decisions because I thought eventually things would change. That you'd slow down. That we'd actually build a life together instead of just existing in the same house. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to sleep with Tyler Grant? He saw me. The words exploded out of her. He paid attention. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than just a supporting character in someone else's story. Is that so hard to understand? I turned to face her. And what did he promise you, exactly? When he became COO and I was pushed aside, what was the plan? She went quiet. I have the emails, Lauren. The ones where you discussed managing me until the selection was over. The ones where you calculated exactly how much of my assets you could claim in the divorce. I watched her face crumble. You weren't just having an affair. You were conspiring to destroy me. It wasn't like that. Tyler said what he needed to say to keep you useful, just like he did with Diana 3 years ago. Just like he's done with every woman who's ever been foolish enough to believe his promises. I pulled the divorce papers from my briefcase. This is over. All of it. Sign these and we can end this with whatever dignity remains. The final phase was negotiation, the one I'd expected from the start. Ryan, please. She was crying now, mascara running in dark tracks down her cheeks. 12 years. That has to mean something. We can work through this. Go to counseling, take time apart, whatever you need. I'll end things with Tyler. I'll quit Vertex. I'll do whatever it takes. What I need is a divorce. You're not even going to try. You're just going to throw away everything we built because I made a mistake? You didn't make a mistake, Lauren. You made a choice. 100 choices. Over 18 months, each one a conscious decision to betray me. I picked up my keys. The choices you made tonight will determine what comes next. The FBI is investigating Tyler for corporate espionage. If you cooperate, if you're honest about what you knew and when, you might avoid criminal charges. If you try to protect him or yourself by lying, what are you saying? I'm saying that the $50,000 sitting in your private account almost certainly came from the money Tyler made selling Vertex secrets to Meridian. That makes you an accessory, maybe even a co-conspirator. I opened the front door. Get a lawyer, Lauren, a good one. You're going to need it. I walked out into the night, got in my car, and drove to a hotel downtown. The roads were empty, the city quiet, the radio playing something soft and meaningless that I didn't bother to identify. I checked into a room on the 14th floor, corner suite, city view, the kind of impersonal luxury that corporations book for visiting executives. I poured myself a drink from the minibar, stood at the window, and watched the lights of the city blink and shift below me. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel the cathartic release that movies and novels promised would come after confronting betrayal. I felt empty. And maybe that was its own kind of victory, proving that I could face the worst and keep moving forward, that I could absorb the blow without breaking, that I could turn devastation into strategy, and strategy into success. The divorce proceedings began in May and dragged through the summer like a wound that refused to heal. Lauren's attorneys, a high-priced firm specializing in contentious dissolutions, came out swinging. Their strategy was transparent. Paint me as a cold, calculating husband who had driven his wife into another man's arms through emotional neglect. Cast Lauren as the victim. Claim that 12 years of marriage entitled her to half of everything. Mrs. Mitchell sacrificed her own career advancement to support her husband's professional ambitions, their filing argued. She managed their household, maintained their social obligations, and provided the stable foundation upon which Mr. Mitchell built his success. Kevin prepared our response methodically. He produced the prenuptial agreement we'd signed when we were young and poor. He documented Lauren's potential complicity in corporate espionage, noting that such activities voided her claims under the prenup's moral turpitude clause. He obtained bank records showing the suspicious $50,000 deposit from accounts connected to Tyler's illegal income. And then he produced the emails, recovered from Vertex's servers, where nothing is ever truly deleted. Lauren to Tyler, June of the previous year. He's working late again, another night alone. Sometimes I think he'd barely notice if I disappeared. Tyler to Lauren. You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are. That's going to be us, baby. Just a few more months. Lauren to Tyler, August. Once you're COO, we can stop pretending. I'll file for divorce, claim half his assets, and we can finally be together properly. Tyler to Lauren. Just keep him distracted. Make him think everything's fine. By this time next year, we'll be running this company together. Lauren to Tyler, September. He's so trusting. It's almost pathetic. He has no idea what's coming. The judge read these into the record during one of the hearings. I watched Lauren's face as her own words filled the courtroom. The color draining, the dawning realization that no sympathetic narrative could survive this evidence. Final settlement. Lauren received the minimum allowed under our prenuptial agreement. No company stock, no claim to future earnings, no alimony beyond 6 months of transitional support. She walked out of the courthouse on the final day, looking like she'd aged 10 years and 3 months. Her hair pulled back severely. Her makeup unable to hide the exhaustion. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Just the quiet certainty that a chapter had closed. Tyler Grant's fate was decided in federal court the following September. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, money laundering. The prosecutor laid out a timeline that spanned 3 years. 3 years of Tyler Grant betraying the company that had made him wealthy, the colleagues who had trusted him, the life he'd built on a foundation of charm and deception. The evidence was overwhelming. Encrypted communications recovered from his devices, offshore accounts traced through international banking records, testimony from a Meridian executive who'd flipped to save his own skin. The Meridian contact had kept meticulous records, as corporate spies often do, and those records painted a picture of systematic betrayal that left no room for doubt. His defense attorney tried everything. The prosecutor played recordings of Tyler bragging to his Meridian contact about how easy it was to steal from the suckers at Vertex. Plea deal: 18 months in federal prison, $3.2 million in restitution, lifetime ban from the securities industry. He requested a meeting before he reported to the minimum security facility in Connecticut. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Coffee shop on Market Street. Public place, mid-morning, plenty of witnesses. He wasn't going to try anything, and I wanted to see what defeat looked like on the face of the man who'd tried to take everything from me. He arrived 10 minutes late, a man who'd spent his career demanding punctuality from everyone else. He looked like someone had taken the Tyler Grant I knew, the swaggering deal-maker with the $3,000 suits and the winning smile, and slowly deflated him over the course of 6 months. Gray at the temples, deep lines around his eyes, clothes that hung loose on a frame that had clearly stopped caring about gym visits or protein shakes or any of the things that had once made him the most physically commanding presence in every room. He sat across from me without offering his hand. "Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Smaller. I almost didn't. "I know." He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup the waitress brought, though he didn't drink from it. "I wanted to ask you something before I go away. Something I've been thinking about for months." "Ask." "Why did you do it this way?" His eyes met mine, wounded, confused, still searching for an answer that made sense. "You could have confronted me directly that first week. You could have beaten me in the selection fair and square. You're smarter than me, everyone knows it. Instead, you dismantled everything. My career, my marriage, my freedom. Why?" I considered the question. I'd thought about it myself, in the quiet hours of the night when the victory felt hollow and the satisfaction I'd expected never quite arrived. "You stacked the deck against me from the start," I said finally. "You had the board convinced you were the golden boy. You were selling my ideas to our competitors before I even finished presenting them. If I'd just competed fairly, you would have won, not because you were better, but because you were cheating. So you cheated back. I leveled the playing field. There's a difference." Tyler shook his head slowly, his fingers tightening around the coffee cup. "Lauren came to me. You need to understand that. She was unhappy. She said you'd stopped seeing her years ago, that you were married to your job instead of to her. She was lonely and you took advantage of that. I connected with her." A flash of the old Tyler, the defender of his own virtue. Is that so wrong? Two people finding something real in the middle of all this corporate emptiness? You promised her a promotion when you became COO. You discussed how to manage me until the selection was over. You calculated how much of my assets she could claim in the divorce. I kept my voice level, almost conversational. That's not connection, Tyler. That's conspiracy. His jaw tightened. I loved her. You loved the advantage she gave you. There's a difference. And you? Did you love her? Or was she just another asset in your portfolio? Something to be protected because it belonged to you, not because it mattered. The question hung between us. I thought about Lauren. Not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the woman I'd married. The way she laughed at my terrible jokes in those early years. The way she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder during long flights. The way she'd believed in my potential before anyone else at Vertex had bothered to notice I existed. Had I loved her? Or had I just loved the idea of being loved? It doesn't matter now, I said. What's done is done. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. I stood, leaving money on the table for coffee neither of us had touched. Enjoy your 18 months. Try to find something productive to do with the time. When you get out, the industry will have moved on. The people who remember your name will remember it as a cautionary tale. And you'll be running the company I helped build. I'll be running the company you tried to steal from. I put on my coat. There's a difference. I was at the door when he called out. Ryan. I turned. Tyler looked smaller somehow, diminished by more than just the weight loss and the prison-bound future. He looked like a man who had finally understood that the game he'd been playing had rules he'd never bothered to learn. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. Not for loving Lauren. I won't apologize for that. But for the rest of it. The secrets. The manipulation. The way I tried to take what should have been yours. I considered his apology, weighed it against 18 months of lies, against a marriage destroyed, against a career nearly derailed by a man who'd smiled at me every morning while plotting my downfall. It's not worth much, I said. And I walked out into the morning sun, leaving Tyler Grant alone with his coffee and his regrets and the 18-month countdown to a future he'd never imagined. 2 years later, an envelope arrived at my office. No return address, plain white, my name typed on the front in standard corporate font. Inside, a newspaper clipping from some small-town weekly in Ohio. Wedding announcement. Lauren Mitchell, née Sullivan, was getting married to a local businessman who owned a chain of car dealerships. Attached, a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery. I hope you're happy destroying people's lives. I finally found someone who actually loves me. Someone who sees me. Someone who would never do what you did. I looked at it for a long moment. She still didn't understand. She never would. In her mind, she was the victim, betrayed not by her own choices but by a cold, calculating husband who valued revenge over reconciliation. Maybe she was right about one thing. I was cold. I was calculating. But I hadn't destroyed her life. She'd done that herself, one decision at a time, one lie after another, until there was nothing left but consequences. I fed the letter through the shredder, watching the cream-colored paper turn to confetti. Then I finished my coffee, checked my calendar for the afternoon's meetings, and went back to work. Vertex's stock was up 41% since I'd taken over as COO. The Lighthouse platform had exceeded all projections. The board was already talking about my eventual transition to CEO when the current one retired. I had a dinner reservation that evening with Catherine, the economics professor I'd been seeing for the past year. We'd met when I was invited to give a guest lecture on corporate strategy at the university. She was smart, independent, uninterested in corporate politics. She challenged me intellectually and made me laugh at my own pretensions. She had no idea about any of this, the affair, the espionage, the calculated destruction of 2 careers and a marriage. I intended to keep it that way. Some stories don't need to be told. Some wounds are better left to heal in private. Some people spend their lives waiting for closure, waiting for the other person to acknowledge what they did, to apologize, to show remorse. They want the satisfaction of seeing their betrayers broken, humbled, begging for forgiveness that may or may not be granted. I'd learned something different in military intelligence, something that had served me well in boardrooms and bedrooms alike. Closure is a myth invented by people who can't let go. Victory isn't about making your enemies understand what they lost. It's about knowing, with absolute, unshakable certainty, that you did what needed to be done. Lauren thought she married someone she could manage. Tyler thought he was competing against someone he could outmaneuver. Diana thought she was using me as a weapon in her own private war. They were all wrong. And they all paid the price for their miscalculation. I wasn't the passive one. I was the patient one. And in the end, patience is just another word for winning.